What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
How do you, I mean, you said one of the names of your book is like The Little Green Men or something
Lights
like
in the Sky and Little Green Men.
Yeah, so how do you explain, are like the little green men little devil angels, or?
Well, I'm making the point that if you go back deep in history, thousands of years ago, they're not appearing as unidentified flying objects. They're typically appearing as little creatures. Again, a good explanation is the leprechauns or the fairies that people were experiencing. Again, they're adapting to our technology and our culture. And so until the invention of the aircraft, until they had these blimps in the sky, they weren't appearing that way.
Right. How do you explain some of the nuclear encounters, though? And for a little background on that, that's another thing that I discussed a lot with James Fox when he was in here. But, you know, James is like, I'm not sure there's a better historian of the post-World War II phenomenon than James. I mean, his movie, The Phenomenon, I may be a little biased, but I think it's probably the best UFO documentary ever made. It goes through that history as beautifully as anything I've ever seen. But there are so many sightings that occurred, not just in the United States, but around the world, in Russia, where you talked about the occult and stuff like that, that involve nuclear bases and military personnel. And they will watch their nuclear triggers get fucked with, and things will change. They'll either turn on or turn off. And they've discussed how it's like, I think, what was the guy's name, Alessi? The old guy who took Bob, it was the intro to 138. I probably already played it in this episode. But Bob Salas, that's it. Bob Salas, who was on a base in America, who purports some of these sightings, you know, he talks about it. It was almost like they were taking matches out of the hands of a baby. Because in the post-World War II world, after we reached the nuke and used it twice on Japan, which was definitely excessive, but that's neither here nor there. It's almost like that unlocked this thing where humanity could destroy itself, which is a real biblical type idea, by the way. But these beings start appearing on these bases to take away, to tell us they're stopping our ability to do that. That was reported so much, and if that pattern isn't even somewhat true, that would seem to be a very positive one to me. So is that angels?
Well, I don't see a lot of that in the UFO literature. I mean, I've read those kinds of stories, but it's like I'm not seeing the documentation. What they do document is that the most common appearance of a UFO is 3 a.m. in the morning on lonely country roads, which I find fascinating because guess what? That's where our telescopes are. It's we astronomers who spend a lot of time at 3 a.m. in the morning on lonely country roads trying to observe the heavens. And yet, what I document in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, observational astronomers have one of the lowest incidents of UFO encounters. Although I do know of 2 astronomers who would come on the telescope for 3 or 4 hours a year, and almost every time they had a UFO encounter. Meanwhile, I'm logging 1,500 hours a year. I never have an encounter. 2 of my fellow graduate students likewise were logging about 1,500 hours a year. We never saw a thing. I said, well, I know the difference. The 3 of us, we're not involved in the occult. Those 2, we know, are deeply involved. And so they were seeing it virtually every time.
You knew they were deeply involved with it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they didn't make any bones about it. So they were because they were saying, we're scientists, we're trying to gain power. And I said, well, what are you guys doing? It's like, oh, yeah, they're trying to call up demons.
But is that the intention, though? They're not trying to call demons.
No, they want the power.
Some people can, but...
Well, I mean, I even saw that at Caltech, especially saw it when I was in the Soviet Union. They got fascinated by things floating in midair and they were doing quite physics research. And I said, yeah, it only happens to the physicists that are involved in the occult. We don't see spoons floating in midair, but they do. And I remember, too, in our church, there was a couple that just purchased a home, and they said there's one room that's colder than all the other rooms, and it's a room where pencils and spoons float in midair. And we think that there's a demon here. We think there's something messing this place up. And I said, well, that can only happen if the previous owners left behind an occult article. We need to find it and get rid of it. I said, we've already searched the house. We found nothing. I says, well, let's bring a team over. And so we prayed for about 30 minutes that, God would help us find the article. They said, we've searched the whole house. And I said, what about the basement? We've searched that too. What about the garage? He says, take me to the garage. Went into the garage, and I saw rafters with a pile of junk lumber on top of the rafters. He says, have you gone through that junk lumber? No, we haven't. We hauled all the junk lumber down. In the middle of it was an astrological forecaster. We went back into the room that was colder than the other rooms. You could see a faint octagonal outline on one wall. It was the exact same size as this astrological forecaster. We destroyed it. The room temperature went back to normal. No more floating objects in the room.
Right away.
Right away. And
just by destroying it.
Just by destroying that one item, it was all gone.
Which is a supernatural occurrence because that violates certain laws.
Yes. But if you got angels, they're not subject to the laws of physics. So, and, when you have experiences like that repeatedly throughout your life, you begin to realize the angelic realm is real.
When did you realize that was real? Was that coincided with your time to converting to Christianity, or was it sometime after that?
Well, I remember when I first got the job of dealing with UFO reports. I mean, when I went on to the University of British Columbia, they said, we're going to have you deal with all this because you know the night sky. You can explain all this stuff to people. And I thought that all this UFO stuff was nonsense, that I could explain everything as a natural phenomena, some military activity, or people were just playing a hoax. I remember especially undergraduate engineering students, they loved to duplicate UFO phenomena. They were playing tricks. And so for a number of years, I was convinced I could explain everything. But then I began to have these other people coming to me, and I realized, oh, there's more going on than just the pure physical realm here. There's something happening, but it's a very small percentage. Now, most UFO researchers say that 5% of what people tell them are in the category of non-physical reality. For me, it was only 1%. But I think that's because, being an astronomer, I was able to recognize more of the natural phenomena than the other researchers were. But it's somewhere between 1 and 5%.
Even that seems like almost a little high to me, too. I mean, I would think, like you said, there's so many damn stories out there.
Right.
That people say it, and even just having a few be true is wild to me, right?
Well, the total database is in the tens of millions. So when you talk about 1 to 5%, we're talking a lot of evidence.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. That's one thing that people like Jacques Vallée say. We can't just push this underneath the table. There's way too many experiences people are having. And hey, if it's 1% out of 20 million, well, that's 200,000 encounters. I mean, it's not a small number.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.